I stood at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, watching my son Brad's rental car disappear into traffic. My wallet, passport, and phone were gone. Brad said he was parking the car, but never came back. I realized my own son had abandoned me in a foreign country, where I didn't speak the language. At 67, after selling my construction business and trusting Brad with power of attorney to help manage my assets, I discovered the ultimate betrayal. My son wanted me gone to steal everything. 3 weeks before that terrible moment in Paris, I was sitting in my kitchen in Denver, staring at the coffee mug Martha used to drink from every morning. She'd been gone 2 years, taken by cancer that moved faster than any of us expected. The house felt too quiet, too empty, filled with memories that both comforted and haunted me. That's when Brad showed up at my door with his wife Jennifer. It was unusual because Brad hadn't visited much since Martha's funeral. He lived just 20 minutes away, but always seemed too busy with his real estate business to stop by. "Dad, you look tired," Brad said, settling into the living room chair he'd claimed as his own growing up. Jennifer perched beside him on the sofa, her designer purse placed carefully on the coffee table. "I'm managing." I told them, though truth be told, the loneliness was getting to me. Selling Cooper Construction had given me financial security but left me without purpose. $3.2 million in the bank didn't fill the empty hours. "Jennifer and I have been talking." Brad continued exchanging glances with his wife. "You need a vacation, Dad. When's the last time you traveled?" I thought about it. Martha and I had planned to see Europe after I retired, but cancer stole those dreams along with everything else. "How about a father-son trip?" Brad suggested, leaning forward with enthusiasm I hadn't seen from him in years. "Just you and me exploring Paris, Rome, maybe London. My treat." The offer surprised me. Brad had never suggested spending time together, not since he was a teenager. Something stirred in my chest, a hope that maybe my son wanted to reconnect after all these years of distance. "That's generous, Brad, but you don't need to pay for me," I said. "I insist," he replied quickly. "Consider it my way of saying thanks for everything you've done for me over the years." Jennifer nodded encouragingly. "It would be good for both of you. Brad's been working so hard lately he could use a break too." Over the next few days, Brad threw himself into planning our trip with an energy that both touched and puzzled me. He handled all the arrangements, booking flights and hotels, creating an itinerary that covered all the places Martha had dreamed of seeing. "There's just one thing, Dad," Brad mentioned casually one evening while showing me hotel brochures. "I think you should give me power of attorney while we're abroad. You know, just in case something happens and decisions need to be made back home." Power of attorney. I set down the brochure of the Parisian hotel. "That seems excessive for a 2-week trip. It's just precautionary." Jennifer chimed in from the kitchen where she was supposedly making tea, but clearly listening. "What if something happens with the house while you're gone? A pipe bursts or there's an emergency, Brad could handle it without bothering you overseas." The explanation seemed reasonable enough, though something nagged at me. Still, this was my son. Despite our strained relationship, surely I could trust him with temporary authority. My neighbor Harold knocked on my door the day before we left. A retired FBI agent with sharp eyes that missed nothing, Harold and I had become friends over morning coffee and discussions about the declining Broncos. "Cooper, I need to speak with you," Harold said, declining my offer to come inside. "It's about your boy." "What about Brad?" Harold shifted uncomfortably. "He's been asking questions around the neighborhood. Wanted to know if you'd mentioned anything about your finances, whether you'd updated your will recently. Tom Garrett at the bank told me Brad tried to get information about your accounts." My stomach tightened. "Tom wouldn't tell him anything without my permission." "No, but the fact he's asking concerns me." Harold studied my face. This sudden trip, it feels wrong. In my experience, when estranged family members suddenly show interest, money's usually involved. Brad's my son, I said, though doubt crept into my voice. He wouldn't he? Harold pulled out a small notebook. I did some checking. Brad's real estate business isn't doing well. 3 failed developments in the past 2 years. Jennifer's spending habits haven't adjusted to their reduced income. I thought about Jennifer's designer purse, Brad's new Mercedes in my driveway, the expensive watch he wore. Where was the money coming from if his business was failing? Be careful, Cooper, Harold warned. Maybe I'm wrong, but keep your eyes open. And here, he handed me a business card. That's my direct number. Memorize it. If anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. That night, I couldn't shake Harold's warnings. After Brad and Jennifer left, I decided to test his concerns. I placed my phone on speaker and pretended to call my lawyer while actually calling my own voicemail. Then I waited. 20 minutes later, I heard Brad's Mercedes pull into my driveway. They must have forgotten something. I stayed in my bedroom keeping quiet as I heard the front door open with the spare key I'd given Brad years ago. He was talking to his lawyer. Jennifer's voice drifted up the stairs. What if he's changing his mind? He won't, Brad replied. I've got him excited about this trip. Once he signs that power of attorney tomorrow, we're set. And you're sure this will work? Once he's gone, we'll have everything. The old fool trusts me completely. $3.2 million from the business sale, plus this house worth at least $850,000. We'll be set for life. My blood turned cold. I pressed record on my phone, capturing their conversation. What if he comes back early? Jennifer asked. He won't be coming back at all if things go according to plan, Brad said. There are ways to make someone disappear in a foreign country. Confused elderly man doesn't speak the language, mysterious disappearance. By the time anyone realizes something's wrong, I'll have already transferred the assets. I sat on my bed phone, shaking in my hand, as my own son discussed my disappearance like a business transaction. The boy I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, sent to college, was planning to abandon me overseas for money. But they'd made one mistake. They'd revealed their plan while I was still here to stop it. I spent the rest of the night making preparations. I called Harold, played him the recording, and together we developed a plan. I would go on the trip, let Brad think everything was proceeding normally, but I'd be ready for whatever he attempted. The next morning I signed the power of attorney papers with a smile, hugged my son, like nothing was wrong, and prepared for a trip that would either break my heart completely or give me the chance to expose his betrayal. As we drove to the airport, Brad chatted excitedly about our itinerary, unaware that I knew the truth. Every smile, every gesture of false affection twisted the knife deeper. But I maintained my facade, playing the role of the trusting father, while inside the silent wolf began to awaken. The flight to Paris passed in a blur of forced conversation and false smiles. Brad played the attentive son, perfectly helping me with my seatbelt, ordering my meals, even offering me his neck pillow when I pretended to doze. Every caring gesture felt like poison, knowing what he planned. Charles de Gaulle. Airport overwhelmed me with its size and energy. Signs in French pointed every direction, announcements echoed in languages I didn't understand, and thousands of travelers rushed past with determined purpose. Brad stayed close, his hand on my elbow, guiding me through customs and baggage claim like a devoted son. Let me handle everything, Dad, he said, as we collected our luggage. International travel can be confusing. I've got all our documents right here. He patted his jacket pocket, where he'd placed both our passports after clearing customs. Outside, the November air hit sharp and cold. Brad led me to a rental car agency again, insisting on managing all the paperwork. I watched him slip my passport into his briefcase, along with the rental agreement. The hotel's about 40 minutes away. Brad explained as we loaded our bags into a silver Peugeot. Right in the heart of the city, walking distance to everything. The drive through Parisian streets should have been magical. This was Martha's dream, seeing the city of light. And here I was without her, accompanied by a son, plotting my demise. I stared out the window, memorizing landmarks, trying to get my bearings in case I needed them later. The Hotel Saint-Germain stood elegant on a narrow street lined with cafes and shops. Brad handled check-in while I waited in the marble lobby, admiring oil paintings of Parisian scenes. When he returned, he handed me a room key, but I noticed he kept all the paperwork. "They need to verify some information," Brad said casually. "I'll hold on to your passport and wallet for now. You know how these European hotels are about security." I nodded, playing along, though I'd traveled enough during my construction years to know this wasn't standard procedure. We took the small elevator to the third floor, and Brad showed me to my room adjacent to his. "Why don't you rest for a bit?" he suggested. "Jet lag hits harder at your age. I'll come get you for dinner around 7. Alone in my room, I checked my belongings. As expected, Brad had my passport, but I'd hidden €300 in my shoe and another 200 in my shaving kit. Harold had insisted on these precautions, and I silently thanked him for his foresight. Dinner that evening was at a bistro around the corner. Brad ordered in broken French, selecting wine and dishes with apparent expertise. He kept my wine glass full, encouraging me to enjoy myself, but I carefully nursed the same glass all evening. "Tomorrow we'll see the Eiffel Tower," Brad promised over dessert. "Then the Louvre in the afternoon. I've got us tickets for a Seine river cruise in the evening." "Sounds wonderful," I replied, though my mind was elsewhere, wondering when he'd make his move. For 2 days, Brad played the perfect tour guide. We climbed the Eiffel Tower, wandered through the Louvre, strolled along the Champs-Élysées. He took photos of us together, sending them to Jennifer with captions about quality father-son time. All the while, he kept my documents, always finding excuses when I asked for them. On our third morning, Brad announced a change of plans over breakfast. "Dad, I need to run an errand at the airport," he said, spreading jam on his croissant. "Someone from my office is flying in with important documents I need to sign. Real estate deal that can't wait." "I'll come with you," I offered. "No need to trouble yourself. It'll be boring business talk. Why don't you explore the neighborhood? I'll be back in a couple hours." But something in his eyes told me this was it. This was the moment he'd chosen. "Actually," I said, "I need to exchange more currency. My cash is running low. The exchange rate's better at the airport." Brad's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I can handle that for you." "I'd prefer to do it myself. You know how I am about money." I forced a chuckle. "Old habits from running a business." He couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. During the drive to the airport, Brad seemed nervous, checking his phone, constantly drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. I memorized the route, noting landmarks and metro stations. At the airport, Brad pulled into the departure area. "I'll just park and meet you inside," he said. "Wait for me by the currency exchange." I grabbed my small day bag and climbed out. Brad sped off toward the parking garage, and I walked into the terminal, finding the currency exchange as promised. But I knew he wouldn't return. This was his plan all along, abandoning me at the airport without documentation or means to get home. 30 minutes passed. Then, an hour. I tried calling Brad's cell from a payphone, but it went straight to voicemail. Airport security approached when they noticed me lingering. "Monsieur, is there a problem?" one officer asked in accented English. "My son was supposed to meet me here," I explained. "He has my passport and wallet." The officer's expression grew concerned. "How long have you been waiting?" "Over an hour." "Do you have any identification?" I shook my head, the reality of my situation sinking in. Without a passport, I couldn't fly home. Without money or credit cards, I couldn't even take a taxi back to the hotel. Brad had executed his plan perfectly, leaving me stranded and helpless in a foreign country. "Monsieur, without identification, you cannot remain in the secure area." The officer explained not unkindly. "Perhaps you should contact your embassy." He escorted me to the public area of the terminal. I sat on a bench watching planes take off through giant windows and reached into my shoe. There, written on a small piece of paper, was Harold's number. Thank God for suspicious retired FBI agents. Finding a payphone that accepted coins took another 20 minutes. My fingers shook as I dialed the international code, then Harold's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Please answer," I prayed. "Cooper." Harold's voice came through clear, despite the distance. "What's wrong?" "He did it," I said, my voice cracking. "Brad abandoned me at the airport. He has everything, my passport, wallet, all of it." "Where exactly are you?" "Charles de Gaulle Airport Terminal 2. Listen carefully." Harold's tone shifted to his FBI voice, calm and authoritative. "First, you're going to be okay. I've got contacts at the State Department who can fast-track an emergency passport. But Cooper, there's something you need to know." My grip tightened on the receiver. "What?" "Brad filed paperwork yesterday claiming you're showing signs of severe dementia. He's telling people you wandered off in Paris confused and disoriented. He's already started the process to have himself declared your legal guardian due to mental incompetence." The terminal spun around me. While I'd been playing tourist thinking I was prepared, Brad had been executing a plan far more elaborate than simple abandonment. "There's more," Harold continued. "He listed your house for sale this morning. The listing says it's an emergency sale due to medical expenses for your care overseas." "He can't do that. With power of attorney and claims of your mental deterioration, he's trying. But we're going to stop him. First, you need to get to the U.S. Embassy. Do you have any money?" "About €500 hidden in my shoes and shaving kit." "Good. Take a taxi to the embassy. I'll call ahead, have them expecting you. My friend Roger Martinez works there, he'll help you. Cooper, we're going to get you home and nail your son to the wall for this." I hung up fury, replacing the initial shock. Brad thought he'd left me helpless, a confused old man lost in Paris. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I'd built a construction company from nothing, survived economic downturns, navigated union negotiations, and held my wife's hand through her final breath. I wasn't some feeble victim. Finding a taxi required leaving the airport, but I managed with gestures and the embassy address Harold had given me. The driver studied me curiously in his mirror, perhaps wondering about the elderly American with grim determination etched on his face. Paris rushed by outside the windows, beautiful and indifferent to my crisis. Somewhere in this city, my son was probably celebrating his success, telling Jennifer their plan had worked, that the old fool was gone, and the money was theirs. But Brad had made a critical error. He'd underestimated me just like clients used to before I'd outmaneuvered them in negotiations. He thought age made me weak, that grief had made me vulnerable. He was about to learn that Cooper Stevens didn't go down without a fight. The taxi meter climbed steadily as we navigated traffic, each euro spent, reminding me of my precarious situation. But I had allies Brad didn't know about, resources he couldn't imagine, and most importantly, I had the truth on my side. The American embassy appeared ahead, the familiar flag a welcome sight. I paid the driver carefully, counting my remaining euros, and walked through the security checkpoint with purpose. Brad thought he'd thrown me away like garbage, but he'd actually lit a fire that would consume everything he'd schemed to steal. Inside the embassy, I asked for Roger Martinez, Harold's contact. Within minutes, a tall man with kind eyes and a firm handshake appeared. "Mr. Stevens, Harold Brennan told me to expect you. Please come with me. We're going to get you home and deal with your son." As I followed him through embassy corridors, I thought about Brad somewhere in Paris, probably already spending my money in his mind. He had no idea that the trap he'd sprung had caught the wrong victim. The silent wolf wasn't just awake now. It was hunting. Roger Martinez led me to a small office where an American flag stood in the corner, and photos of the President and Secretary of State adorned the walls. He gestured to a chair across from his desk and poured me a cup of coffee, without asking if I wanted one. The simple kindness nearly undid me. "Harold filled me in on the basics," Roger said, settling behind his desk. "Your son abandoned you here without documentation, claiming you have dementia. He's attempting to take your assets. Is that accurate?" "That's the simplified version," I replied, warming my hands on the coffee mug. "Brad planned this for weeks. I have a recording of him discussing it with his wife, but that's back in Denver." Roger nodded, typing notes into his computer. "First things first, we need to get you an emergency passport. Normally this takes a few days, but given the circumstances and Harold's vouching for you, we can expedite it. However, you'll need a photo and we'll have to verify your identity through our databases." "How long?" "If we push it through today, you could have it by tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, do you have a place to stay?" I thought about the hotel where Brad had taken my room key along with everything else. "Not really. I have about 400 euros left, but I need to conserve funds." Roger leaned back, studying me. "Harold mentioned you owned a construction company, Cooper Construction in Denver. For 35 years until I sold it 2 years ago." His face brightened. "Did you ever work with Bouchard International?" "They're a French firm that partners with American construction companies." The name triggered memories. Pierre Bouchard. We did 3 projects together back in the 90s. His company built that new terminal at Denver International based on our designs. "Pierre's my brother-in-law," Roger said with a smile. "Small world. Let me make a call." While Roger spoke rapid French into his phone, I stared out his window at Paris rooftops. Somewhere in this city, Brad was probably enjoying a leisurely lunch, confident his plan had succeeded. He didn't know about Harold's connections, or Roger's efficiency, or the network of relationships I'd built over decades in business. Roger hung up. "Pierre remembers you well. Says you saved his company during that concrete shortage in '97. He's sending a car to pick you up. You'll stay with his family tonight while we sort out your passport." "I can't impose like that." "It's not imposing. Pierre insists. He says anyone who treats their workers as fairly as you did is welcome in his home anytime." Roger paused. "Besides, you'll need allies for what comes next. Harold mentioned your son has power of attorney." "Temporary power supposedly just for the trip." I explained about the recording Brad's failing business, his plans to claim I'd disappeared. Roger's expression darkened. "Elder abuse through financial exploitation. The FBI takes that seriously, especially when it crosses international borders. Once we get you home, your son will face federal charges." A knock interrupted us. Roger's assistant entered with forms for my emergency passport application. As I filled them out, providing details about my birth in Colorado, my military service in Vietnam, my years building Cooper Construction, I felt my identity returning. Brad had tried to erase me, but each answered question rebuilt who I was. Pierre Bouchard arrived 2 hours later, looking exactly as I remembered, except for silver hair replacing brown. He embraced me like an old friend, which I suppose we were, though we'd only met in person a handful of times. "Cooper, mon ami Roger, told me everything," Pierre said in accented English. "Your son is a fool to treat you this way. Come, my wife has prepared dinner, and we will plan how to handle this situation." The Bouchard home sat in a quiet suburb outside Paris, a stone house with a garden that reminded me of Martha's rose bushes back home. Pierre's wife, Sylvie, greeted me warmly, and over dinner with their adult children and grandchildren, I found myself surrounded by the kind of family warmth Brad had only pretended to offer. "Papa tells us you helped save our company once," Pierre's son, Laurent, said over wine. "The concrete shortage of '97 is legendary in our family." "Your father exaggerates," I said, but Pierre shook his head. "No, you flew to Mexico yourself to negotiate with suppliers when everyone else had given up. You split your allocation with us even though your competitors would have paid triple. That's not something we forget." After dinner, Pierre and I retired to his study. He poured cognac and we sat in leather chairs, the weight of my situation settling between us. "Roger will get your passport sorted," Pierre said. "But I'm thinking beyond that. Your son will expect you to be helpless, yes, to perhaps never make it home. That seems to be his plan. Then we must ensure you return in a way he doesn't expect. I have connections at Air France. We can book you a flight under their security protocols, keep it off the normal passenger lists. Your son won't know you're coming until you arrive." I sipped the cognac, feeling the burn down my throat. "I need to get to my lawyer and the bank before Brad can do more damage." "Of course. But first tell me this recording you mentioned of your son's planning." "It's on my phone back home, hidden in my bedroom." Pierre smiled. "And if your neighbor Harold could retrieve it? If your lawyer could begin proceedings before you even land?" Hope stirred in my chest. "That would change everything." We spent the next hour on Pierre's phone connected to Harold in Denver. My neighbor had already been busy using his FBI connections to flag Brad's activities. The house listing had been suspended after Harold provided evidence I wasn't actually missing. My bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. "Brad's getting desperate," Harold reported. "He's been calling everyone claiming you wandered off confused and he's searching hospitals. He even filed a missing person report to cover his tracks." "Let him think I'm lost," I said. "How soon can Carl start the legal proceedings?" Carl, my lawyer for 20 years, came on the line. "Cooper, thank God you're safe. I can file for revocation of power of attorney immediately based on fraud and elder abuse. With that recording Harold retrieved from your house, we have evidence of premeditation. The FBI is very interested in talking to your son." "What about my assets?" "Protected for now. The bank froze everything when Harold alerted them. Brad can't touch anything without multiple verifications that he can't provide. But Cooper, he's already withdrawn about $400,000 before we caught it." $400,000. Money I'd earned through decades of hard work stolen by my own flesh and blood. The wolf inside me growled louder. "He'll have to pay it back," Carl continued. "With interest and penalties. Criminal prosecution aside, the civil case is straightforward. But we need you here to file charges." "I'll be home soon," I promised. That night in Pierre's guest room, I lay awake planning. Brad thought he'd left me helpless, a confused old man lost in a foreign city. Instead, I'd found allies' protection and a way home he'd never anticipate. The boy who'd once begged me to check for monsters under his bed had become the monster himself, but monsters could be defeated. The next afternoon, Roger called with good news. My emergency passport was ready. Pierre drove me to the embassy where Roger waited with the precious document. "Your flight leaves tonight," Roger said, handing me an Air France envelope. "Pierre arranged everything. You'll land in Denver at 6 a.m. local time. Harold will meet you." "I don't know how to thank you both," I said, overcome by the kindness of near strangers. "Stop your son," Pierre said simply. "That's thanks enough. Men like him give all children bad names." That evening, Pierre's son, Laurent, drove me to Charles de Gaulle Airport, the same place where my ordeal had begun. This time I walked through security with my own passport, my own ticket, my own determination. Brad had no idea I was coming home. As the plane lifted off, I thought about what awaited me. Brad would be at my house, probably cataloging possessions for sale, spending my money in his mind. Jennifer would be planning renovations, or maybe shopping for a new car. They thought they'd won. But the silent wolf was returning to Denver, and Brad was about to learn what happened when you cornered a predator who'd spent 67 years learning how to survive. He'd wanted me to disappear in Paris. Instead, I'd found strength in the City of Lights, and I was bringing that strength home. The flight attendant offered me champagne as we reached cruising altitude. I accepted, raising my glass silently to Martha. "I'll handle this, honey," I whispered. "Our son lost his way, but I'll make sure he finds justice." Outside the window, the Atlantic Ocean stretched dark and vast. Somewhere ahead, morning was coming to Denver, and with it a reckoning Brad never saw coming. The silent wolf was going home, and the hunt was about to begin. The plane descended through morning clouds toward Denver International Airport, the mountains visible in the distance like old friends welcoming me home. I'd dozed fitfully during the flight dreams, mixing with plans, Martha's face alternating with Brad's betrayal. Now, as the wheels touched down on Colorado soil, exhaustion gave way to determination. Harold stood waiting outside customs, his FBI training evident, and how he scanned the crowd, even while holding a small sign with my name. When he spotted me, relief crossed his weathered face. "Welcome home, Cooper," he said, gripping my hand firmly. "You look like hell." "Feel worse," I admitted. "But I'm here." During the drive to Harold's house, he updated me on Brad's activities. My son had elevated his performance calling hospitals across France, posting on social media about his missing father with dementia, even hiring a private investigator to search for me in Paris. "He's established quite the paper trail," Harold said, merging onto I-70. "Makes him look like a devoted son desperately searching for his confused father. The neighbors bought it completely. Karen Hendricks even organized a prayer circle. While he's been stealing everything I own." "About that." Harold glanced at me. "Carl needs to see you immediately, but we thought it best if you stay off the radar for now. Let Brad think his plan is working while we document everything." Harold's basement had been transformed into a command center. Multiple monitors showed security feeds from around my property, courtesy of cameras Harold had installed after I left. Legal documents covered a folding table, and a coffee pot gurgled in the corner. Carl rose from a chair as I entered. My lawyer looked tired but determined, his usually perfect suit wrinkled from long hours. "Cooper, thank God," Carl said. "We have a situation. Brad's moved faster than anticipated. He's filed for guardianship based on your supposed mental incompetence, claiming you're a danger to yourself." I sank into a chair, the jet lag hitting hard. "Can he do that?" "He's trying. He has a doctor's statement claiming you showed signs of severe dementia before the trip. The problem is this doctor doesn't seem to exist. We're tracking down the fraud, but in the meantime, he's using it to justify his actions." Harold pulled up footage on one of the monitors. "This is from yesterday. Brad's been moving things out of your house." I watched my son directing movers as they carried Martha's china cabinet to a truck. Jennifer supervised, pointing at items like she was shopping in a store. They'd already taken several paintings, my father's antique desk, and boxes of who knows what else. "The house sale is temporarily blocked," Carl continued, "but Brad's claiming he needs to liquidate assets to pay for your care in a Swiss facility that, surprise, also doesn't exist." "What about the $400,000 he already took?" "Transferred to multiple accounts, some offshore. We're tracing it, but it'll take time. The FBI's involved now, though. Agent Diane Russell will want to interview you." I nodded, still watching Brad on the monitor. He looked confident, relaxed, joking with the movers. No sign of a grieving son worried about his missing father. "There's something else," Harold said quietly. "Sharon at the bank called. Brad's been asking about your safety deposit box. She stalled him, but he's pushing hard, claiming he needs access to your will and insurance documents." My safety deposit box contained more than just documents. Martha's jewelry was there, pieces passed down through her family for generations. The thought of Jennifer wearing my wife's grandmother's necklace made my blood boil. "So what's our plan?" I asked. Carl and Harold exchanged looks. "We let him dig deeper," Carl said. "Every action he takes thinking you're gone adds to the federal charges. Wire fraud, elder abuse, interstate commerce violations. But we need you to stay hidden until we're ready to spring the trap." "How long?" "A few more days. We're setting up a sting with the FBI. Brad's planning to meet with a buyer for your house cash deal quick close. When he shows up to sign papers, we'll be waiting." I spent the next 3 days in Harold's basement watching Brad systematically dismantle my life. He'd changed the locks on my house, hired an estate sale company, and was telling everyone he'd found documentation proving I'd been struggling with dementia for months. Through the cameras, I watched neighbors stop by to offer condolences and help. Brad played the grieving son perfectly, accepting casseroles and sympathy, while plotting to sell everything I'd built with Martha. On the second night, Sharon from the bank called Harold's secure line. "Cooper, I wanted you to know Brad came in with a court order for the safety deposit box. I had to let him access it." My heart sank. Martha's jewelry. "I'm sorry, he cleaned it out. But Cooper, I photocopied everything, documented every item he took. It's all evidence now." After she hung up, I sat in the dark basement, remembering how Martha's eyes lit up when she wore her grandmother's emerald necklace to our anniversary dinners. Brad had been there for some of those dinners, had heard the stories about each piece, knew their sentimental value. Now he'd stolen them like a common thief. Agent Diane Russell arrived the next morning, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who listened to my story without interrupting. She reviewed the evidence Harold and Carl had compiled, examined the forged medical documents, and studied Brad's financial transactions. "Your son's in serious trouble," she said finally. "This crosses multiple jurisdictions, involves federal banking violations, and constitutes elaborate fraud. But here's what concerns me more." She pulled out a printed email. "We intercepted this from Brad to someone named Vincent Torino." I recognized the name from Brad's real estate dealings. "He's a casino owner. Brad mentioned him as a potential investor once." "He's more than that. Torino runs high-stakes private games, the kind that attract desperate people with flexible morals. According to this, Brad owes him $800,000. The pieces clicked together. Brad's desperation wasn't just greed. He was in danger. He'd gambling away money he didn't have, and now needed my assets to save himself from whatever Torino did to Welchers. "This changes things," Carl said, reading the email. "Brad's not just a greedy son. He's a desperate man in debt to dangerous people." "Doesn't excuse what he's done," I said. "No." Agent Russell agreed. "But it means we need to move faster. Desperate people make mistakes, and mistakes around Vincent Torino tend to be fatal." That afternoon, I watched through the cameras as Brad hosted potential buyers at my house. He walked them through rooms where Martha and I had raised him, pointing out features like a realtor, not a son showing his childhood home. Jennifer had staged the place with flowers and baked cookies for ambiance playing house in my life. The buyers seemed interested, especially when Brad mentioned the motivated seller and cash discount. He promised them a deal they couldn't refuse, papers ready to sign within 48 hours. "That's our timeline," Harold said. 2 days from now, Brad signs those papers and we take him down." But as I watched my son shake hands with strangers eager to buy my home, I wondered if part of him remembered the boy who'd helped me build the deck out back, who'd carved his initials in the basement doorframe, who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. Was that boy completely gone, replaced by this desperate man willing to destroy his father for money? That night, unable to sleep, I climbed the stairs from Harold's basement and stood at his kitchen window. My house was visible 3 doors down, lights blazing as Brad continued his inventory. He'd parked his Mercedes in my driveway like he already owned the place. Harold joined me, handing me a cup of coffee. Second thoughts. No, I said, watching Brad's shadow move past a window. He made his choice when he left me at that airport. I just wonder where I went wrong raising him. You didn't, Harold said firmly. Some people choose darkness despite every advantage. Brad had a good father, a loving mother, every opportunity. He chose this path himself. As we stood there, a black Escalade cruised slowly past my house. It paused at the driveway engine, rumbling before continuing down the street. Torino's people, Harold murmured. They're watching him too. The stakes were rising. Brad was juggling too many lies, too many debts, too many crimes. Soon it would all come crashing down. But first I had to ensure he faced justice for what he'd done to me, not whatever street justice Torino might deliver. One more day of hiding, of watching, of planning. Then the silent wolf would strike, and Brad would learn that fathers could be far more dangerous than casino owners when protecting what was theirs. The house he was so eager to sell would become the trap that caught him. I returned to the basement, but not to sleep. Instead, I reviewed every document, every piece of evidence, every recording. Brad thought he'd left me helpless in Paris. Tomorrow he'd discover just how wrong he'd been. Dawn broke gray over Denver as I sat in Harold's basement, surrounded by monitors showing my home from every angle. Brad's Mercedes was already in my driveway at 6 a.m. He emerged carrying coffee and a box of pastries, playing the devoted son, maintaining his missing father's property. Mrs. Patterson from across the street intercepted him on the lawn. Through the audio feed, I heard their conversation clearly. "Any word on Cooper?" she asked, clutching her morning newspaper. Brad's shoulders sagged convincingly. "Nothing yet. The embassy says they're checking hospitals, but—" He let his voice trail off, shaking his head. "I just pray he's safe somewhere." "We're all praying," Mrs. Patterson assured him. "The prayer circle meets again tonight. Will you join us?" "Of course. Dad would appreciate knowing the community cares." After she left, Brad's demeanor changed instantly. He practically skipped to the front door, whistling as he unlocked it with his new keys. The transformation was chilling to watch. Agent Russell arrived at Harold's an hour later with 2 other FBI agents. They spread updated files across the basement table showing Brad's accelerating activities. "He's scheduled the closing for tomorrow at 2 p.m., Russell reported. "Cash buyer, fast close selling for $200,000 under market value. He's clearly desperate." "What about Torino?" I asked. "We've been monitoring. Brad promised him full payment by end of week. Our sources say Torino's patience is running thin. He sent collectors to Brad's house last night." Carl pulled out legal documents. "Cooper, I need you to sign these. Revocation of power of attorney fraud charges, breach of fiduciary duty. Once Brad's arrested, these go into immediate effect." As I signed my name repeatedly, each signature felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. Brad had tried to erase me, but I was writing myself back into existence. "There's something else," Harold said, pulling up new footage. This was 3 a.m. last night. The infrared camera showed Brad and Jennifer in my garage loading boxes into their SUV. But what made my blood run cold was seeing Jennifer wearing Martha's emerald necklace, the garage lights catching its distinctive gleam. "She's wearing my wife's jewelry," I said quietly. "Document it," Russell ordered her agents. "Every piece he stole adds to the charges." I watched Jennifer laugh at something Brad said, touching the necklace absently. She had no idea that piece had been worn by 5 generations of women in Martha's family, that Martha had hoped to pass it to a granddaughter someday. Now, it adorned the neck of a thief. Around noon, Harold's phone rang. Sharon from the bank sounded breathless. "Brad just left here. He tried to wire $200,000 to an offshore account. We blocked it based on the FBI hold, but he was furious. Started yelling about his rights as power of attorney. Did he threaten you? Russell asked, leaning toward the speaker. Not directly, but he said I'd regret interfering with family business. Security escorted him out. Russell nodded to her agents. Add attempted witness intimidation to the charges. The afternoon brought more disturbing developments. Through the cameras, we watched Brad meet with someone in my backyard. The man was clearly a collector for Torino, thick-necked and impatient. Their conversation was too quiet for the audio, but body language told the story. Brad gestured frantically while the collector remained stone-faced, occasionally cracking his knuckles. When the man left, Brad kicked my garden bench, the same bench where Martha and I used to watch sunsets. His mask was slipping desperation overtaking careful planning. He's going to accelerate the sale, Carl predicted. He needs that money now. Sure enough, Brad made a flurry of phone calls. We could only hear his side, but the gist was clear. He was pushing the buyers to close immediately, offering another $50,000 discount for a same-day deal. Jennifer arrived as the sun set, parking her Lexus beside Brad's Mercedes like they owned the place. She carried shopping bags from high-end stores, apparently already spending my money. I can't watch this anymore, I said, standing abruptly. They're in my home wearing my wife's jewelry, selling everything we built. Harold grabbed my arm gently. One more night, Cooper. Tomorrow they lose everything. But I needed air. I climbed the stairs and stepped onto Harold's back deck, breathing deeply. The November air was sharp winter approaching. From here I could see my house's roof line the chimney Martha had insisted on, even though we rarely used the fireplace. Agent Russell joined me. I've seen a lot of elder abuse cases, but this one hits different. Your own son planning it all while smiling at you. I keep thinking about when he was young, I admitted. He used to help me at construction sites during summers. Said he wanted to build things like his dad. When did that boy disappear? Maybe when he realized tearing down was easier than building up, Russell suggested. Some people take the easy path no matter who it hurts. We stood in silence, watching lights flicker in my house. Through the window, I could see Brad and Jennifer in the dining room papers spread across the table Martha had inherited from her mother. They were planning their future with my past. Harold's phone buzzed. Carl's voice came through tense. We have a problem. Brad just filed an emergency motion claiming Cooper is dangerous and needs immediate institutionalization. He's got another forged doctor's report saying I'm helping a mentally incompetent man evade necessary treatment. Can he make that stick? I asked. Not ultimately, but it could complicate tomorrow. He's trying to invalidate any legal action you might take by claiming you're not competent to make decisions. Russell smiled grimly. Actually, this helps us. Filing false reports with the court is another felony. He's so desperate he's making mistakes. We returned to the basement to finalize tomorrow's plan. The buyer would arrive at 2 p.m. FBI agents would be positioned inside and outside. Harold would monitor from his house. Carl would wait at the title company with legitimate paperwork, showing Brad had no right to sell. What about me? I asked. Russell and Harold exchanged looks. You'll be in the house, Russell said. Hidden in your bedroom closet. When Brad brings everyone into the living room for signatures, you'll make your entrance. The poetic justice appealed to me. Brad thought he'd left me lost in a foreign country. Instead, I'd be waiting in my own home, ready to reclaim what was mine. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brad as a boy, then Brad abandoning me at the airport. Then Martha asking me to protect what we'd built together. The images swirled together, past and present colliding. At 3 a.m., Harold woke me. You need to see this. On the monitor, Brad was in my garage again, but this time he wasn't alone. 3 men surrounded him, Torino's collectors. Brad was gesturing frantically at the house, clearly promising them tomorrow's sale would solve everything. One collector grabbed Brad's collar, lifting him slightly. Brad's face showed real fear, now the consequences of his gambling debts becoming tangible. They released him after a few minutes, but their message was clear pay or pay differently. He's going to be even more desperate tomorrow, Harold observed. Good, I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. Let him feel trapped. Let him know what it's like to be abandoned and helpless. As dawn approached on the day of reckoning, I prepared myself mentally. In a few hours, I'd face my son for the first time since he'd left me in Paris. He'd think he was seeing a ghost, the father he'd thrown away returning to destroy his plans. The silent wolf was ready to reveal himself. Brad had set the trap, thinking he was the hunter, but he was about to discover he'd always been the prey. Every document he'd forged, every lie he'd told, every item he'd stolen had led to this moment. I looked at Martha's photo on Harold's desk, the one from our 40th anniversary. Almost done, honey, I whispered. Justice is coming. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the mountains. Somewhere in Denver, Brad was probably already awake, counting his expected money, planning his escape from Torino's reach. He had no idea his father was closer than he'd ever imagined, waiting in the shadows of the life he'd tried to steal. The preparation was complete. Now came the reckoning. The morning of November 15th dawned crisp and clear, the kind of Colorado day Martha used to call bluebird perfect. I watched the sunrise from Harold's kitchen, knowing that by sunset, my son's world would be in ruins. At precisely 10 a.m., Agent Russell's team moved into position. 2 agents posed as utility workers in a van outside my house. Another pair set up in Mrs. Patterson's garage with her gleeful permission once she learned her prayer circle had been praying for a very much alive man. Harold coordinated from his basement command center while I prepared for my performance. Carl called at 11 to confirm everything was ready at his end. The title company knows Brad has no authority. When he shows up to collect the check, they'll stall while we move in. I dressed carefully in the clothes Harold had bought me, simple khakis and a cardigan, the uniform of a harmless retiree. The contrast with Brad's expensive suits would speak volumes. At noon, Harold and I watched Brad arrive at my house for final preparations. He walked through each room with a checklist, ensuring everything looked perfect for the buyers. In my bedroom, he paused at a photo of our family from Brad's college graduation, studying it briefly before placing it face down. Time to move, Russell said through Harold's radio. Cooper, you ready? I nodded, though my heart was racing. Harold drove me to my own back door in his car, keeping below window level. Using the spare key I'd hidden years ago that Brad didn't know about, I slipped inside my own home like a burglar. My bedroom felt strange after Brad's modifications. He'd removed personal items, staging it generically for sale. I settled into the closet, leaving the door cracked enough to hear. The FBI wire I wore would record everything. At 1:45, Brad returned with Jennifer. Through the closet crack, I watched them do a final walkthrough of my bedroom. Once this closes, we're free, Jennifer said, still wearing Martha's necklace. Torino gets his money, we keep the rest, and your father's tragedy becomes our fresh start. Don't count it yet, Brad warned, but his voice carried excitement. The buyers should be here any minute. They moved downstairs, and I heard car doors slam. Multiple voices filled my living room, Brad playing host Jennifer, offering beverages, the buyers asking questions about the neighborhood. I recognized the staged small talk of people about to conduct major business. Shall we get to signatures? Brad suggested after appropriate pleasantries. I have the documents ready in the dining room. This was my cue. I emerged from the closet, each step down my own stairs, feeling like reclaiming territory. At the living room entrance, I paused, taking in the scene. Brad stood with his back to me, gesturing at papers spread on the coffee table. Jennifer sat beside him, my wife's jewelry glittering at her throat. The buyers, a middle-aged couple, looked eager to sign. None of them noticed me yet. "Before you sign anything," I said clearly, "you should know the seller doesn't actually own this house." Brad whirled around his face, cycling through expressions like a slot machine: confusion, recognition, shock, terror. The coffee cup in his hand crashed to the floor. "Hello, son." I continued, stepping fully into the room. "Oh, you're back. I have a surprise for you." Jennifer gasped, her hand flying to the stolen necklace. The buyers looked between us, bewildered. Brad's mouth moved soundlessly, his careful plans crumbling in real time. "Dad," he finally managed. "But how did you get back from Paris?" I finished. "Turns out the U.S. Embassy is very helpful when American citizens are abandoned in foreign countries by their children, especially when those children are trying to steal their assets." The male buyer stood abruptly. "What's going on here?" "An excellent question," Agent Russell said, entering from the kitchen with her badge displayed. "FBI, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, you've been invited to participate in documenting a federal crime. Please remain seated." Brad stumbled backward, knocking into Jennifer. "This is a misunderstanding. My father has dementia. He doesn't know what he's saying." "Interesting," I said, pulling out the emergency passport Roger had issued. The State Department seemed to think I was perfectly competent. So did the federal prosecutor who took my statement. More agents filed in, blocking exits. Harold entered with his laptop, setting it on the coffee table where Brad's fraudulent documents lay. "Should we play the recording?" Harold asked me. "The one where you and Jennifer discuss abandoning your father in Paris." Jennifer's composure shattered. "Brad said it would be simple. He said the old man would never make it back." "Shut up!" Brad hissed at her. "No, please continue," Russell encouraged. "Everything you say is being recorded." I moved closer to my son, close enough to see sweat beading on his forehead. $400,000, Brad. You stole $400,000 while I was trying to survive in a foreign country without documentation. I needed it! Brad exploded his mask, finally dropping completely. "You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under. Torino would have killed me." "So you decided to kill me instead. Leave me helpless in Paris, hope I'd disappear." Brad's face crumbled. For just a moment, I saw the boy he'd been scared and cornered. Then anger replaced fear. "You were always so perfect, weren't you, Cooper Stevens, successful businessman, community pillar? Do you know what it was like growing up in your shadow? Never good enough, never measuring up." "Is that your excuse?" I asked quietly. "I wasn't a perfect father, so you had the right to abandon me." Russell stepped forward. "Brad Stevens, you're under arrest for elder abuse, wire fraud, attempted murder through abandonment, and filing false documents. You have the right to remain silent." As they cuffed him, Brad's eyes never left mine. "I'm your son," he said desperately. "Doesn't that mean anything?" It meant everything. I replied, my voice steady, despite the pain in my chest. "That's why this hurts so much." They led Brad out first, his head down, expensive suit, incongruous with the handcuffs. Jennifer followed, sobbing about lawyers and misunderstandings. But she still wore Martha's necklace, and I made sure Russell knew every piece of jewelry she had on was stolen. The buyers sat frozen until Russell released them with apologies and her business card. They practically ran from the house, probably already calling their realtor about safer properties. Suddenly, my living room was quiet, except for Harold typing on his laptop. I sank into my favorite chair, the one Martha had bought me for my 50th birthday, and tried to process what had just happened. Torino's collectors grabbed Brad in the driveway. Harold reported monitoring the exterior cameras. But the FBI intercepted. He'll be in federal custody safe from immediate harm. Safe. My son, who'd tried to destroy me, was safe from the consequences of his other bad choices. The irony wasn't lost on me. Carl arrived 20 minutes later with paperwork. The house is secure, your accounts are unfrozen, and Brad's power of attorney is officially revoked. We'll begin asset recovery immediately. What about the items they took? I asked, thinking of Martha's china on my father's desk. Already being cataloged as evidence. Everything will be returned. Over the next hours, my house transformed into a crime scene. FBI agents photographed everything, documented Brad's changes, collected evidence of his presence. They found suitcases in the guest room packed with more of my belongings Brad planned to take. As evening approached, the agents finally left. Harold helped me restore some normalcy, returning photos to their proper places, cleaning up the coffee Brad had spilled in shock. Mrs. Patterson brought over a casserole, tearfully apologizing for believing Brad's lies. We all believed him, I assured her. He was very convincing. Later, Harold and I sat on my back deck, beers in hand, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The bench Brad had kicked still bore his footprint, a physical reminder of his desperation. "How do you feel?" Harold asked. I considered the question. Empty, relieved, sad, angry, everything at once. That's normal. You've been betrayed by someone who should have protected you, not tried to destroy you. I keep thinking about what he said about growing up in my shadow. Was I really that hard on him? Harold turned to face me. Cooper, I've known you 5 years. I've heard you talk about Brad with nothing but love and pride, even when he disappointed you. This isn't about your failures as a father. This is about his failures as a human being. A text arrived on my phone from Agent Russell. Brad was being held without bail, deemed a flight risk. Jennifer had been released but faced charges for receiving stolen property. The investigation would continue for months, but the immediate danger was over. As darkness fell over Denver, I thought about Martha. Would she forgive Brad? Would she understand my actions? Knowing her generous heart, she'd probably find a way to love him still, even after this betrayal. But I wasn't Martha. I could forgive Brad eventually, maybe, but trust was gone forever. He'd looked into my eyes at that airport, hugged me goodbye, knowing he was leaving me to potentially die alone and confused in a foreign country. You did the right thing, Harold said, reading my thoughts. Brad made choices. Now he faces consequences. That's justice. Justice. The word felt both satisfying and hollow. I'd protected my assets, exposed Brad's crimes. But I'd also lost my son, not to death, but to greed and gambling and moral bankruptcy. Tomorrow I'd begin the long process of recovering stolen funds, testifying in court, rebuilding the life Brad had tried to dismantle. But tonight I sat on my deck with a true friend in the house my wife and I had made a home safe from those who would harm me. The silent wolf had triumphed, but victory tasted bittersweet. Still, I was home, I was safe, and Brad would never be able to hurt me or anyone else like this again. Sometimes, that has to be enough. 6 months after Brad's arrest, I sat in a federal courthouse in downtown Denver, waiting to testify against my own son. The morning sun slanted through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. Carl sat beside me, reviewing notes one final time. Remember, he said quietly, just tell the truth. The evidence speaks for itself. The evidence was overwhelming. Brad's recorded conversations with Jennifer, the forged medical documents, the fraudulent power of attorney, the attempted sale of my house. But the most damning evidence was the trail of texts between Brad and Jennifer from Paris, celebrating my abandonment while I struggled to find help. When they called me to the stand, I walked past the defendant's table without looking at Brad. But I could feel his presence, the weight of his gaze. The son I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, celebrated with at graduations, now sat in an orange jumpsuit, facing 20 years in federal prison. The prosecutor, a young woman named Sarah Chen, led me through the events methodically. I described discovering Brad's plan, the abandonment at Charles de Gaulle Airport, the terror of being stranded without documentation. My voice remained steady until she showed the photos of Jennifer wearing Martha's jewelry. That necklace belonged to my late wife's great-grandmother, I explained, my voice catching. It was supposed to pass to our grandchildren. Brad shifted in his seat. We'd never have grandchildren now, at least none I'd know. During cross-examination, Brad's lawyer tried to paint me as a confused elderly man who'd misunderstood his son's intentions. But the FBI's evidence countered every attempt. When he suggested I might have imagined the abandonment, I simply showed my emergency passport issued by the embassy. Would the State Department issue emergency documents to someone suffering from dementia? I asked. The jury took less than 3 hours to convict on all charges. As they read the verdict, I finally looked at Brad. His face had aged years in months' prison food and stress replacing his former polish. When our eyes met, I saw not defiance, but despair. Judge Patricia Thornton, a woman known for fair but firm sentences, addressed Brad before sentencing. Mr. Stevens, you didn't just commit financial fraud. You abandoned your father in a foreign country, leaving him without resources or identification, hoping he would disappear. This court has rarely seen such a calculated betrayal of familial trust. She sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison, plus restitution of all stolen funds with interest. Brad would be in his mid-50s when released, his real estate career destroyed, his marriage dissolved. Jennifer had already pled guilty to receiving stolen property in exchange for testimony. She'd served 30 days in county jail and now worked at a grocery store, her Lexus and designer clothes replaced by a bus pass and uniform. After the sentencing, I stood in the courthouse lobby feeling neither triumph nor satisfaction. Harold waited for me by the door, steady as always. "You okay?" he asked. "I need to see him," I heard myself say. Harold nodded, understanding. 2 weeks later, I sat in the visiting room at the Federal Correctional Facility waiting. When guards brought Brad in, I barely recognized him. The confident salesman was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger. We sat across a scarred table monitored by cameras and guards. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Why?" I finally asked. "Just tell me why." Brad's hands fidgeted with his jumpsuit hem. I was drowning Dad. The market crashed, my developments failed, and I started gambling to make it back. Small bets became big ones. Before I knew it, I owed Torino more than I could ever repay. "So you decided to sacrifice me?" "I convinced myself you'd be okay, that someone would help you get you home safely. I just needed time to access the money." He laughed bitterly. "I actually told myself I'd pay you back someday." "But you filed papers claiming I had dementia. You told everyone I'd disappeared." Brad's composure cracked. "I know. Once I started, I couldn't stop. Each lie required another until I'd built a whole fiction. When you walked into that living room," he shuddered. "It was like seeing a ghost. The ghost of the father I'd murdered in my mind." We sat in silence. Around us, other families conducted their own painful visits, love trying to bridge the gap crime had created. "I forgive you," I said eventually. The words surprised both of us. "I can't forget, can't trust you again, but I won't carry hatred. Your mother wouldn't want that." Brad's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "No," I agreed. "But I'm giving it anyway, for my sake, not yours." When I left the prison, I felt lighter. Brad would serve his time, pay his debt to society and to me. The $400,000 had been recovered, Martha's jewelry returned, my house restored. But money and objects weren't what mattered. What mattered was what I did next. With Harold's help, I established the Martha Stevens Foundation for Elder Protection. Using part of the restitution money, we created programs to help elderly people recognize and prevent financial exploitation by family members. I spoke at senior centers, sharing my story, warning others about the warning signs I'd missed. The foundation grew quickly. Other victims came forward with their own stories of children, grandchildren, or caregivers who'd stolen from them. We provided legal resources counseling, and most importantly, the knowledge that they weren't alone. Sharon from the bank joined our board, using her position to train bank employees in recognizing elder abuse. Agent Russell consulted on law enforcement outreach, teaching officers how to investigate these sensitive cases. Even Pierre Bouchard contributed from France, helping us understand how international abandonment schemes worked. 1 year after Brad's sentencing, we held our first fundraising gala. Over 200 people attended, raising enough to fund a full-time attorney for elder abuse victims. I spoke about Martha, about trust, about the difference between justice and revenge. My son stole from me, I told the audience. But what he really stole was my faith in family. Getting that back, learning to trust again, that's been harder than any financial recovery. Yet here I stand, surrounded by new family people who protect rather than prey on vulnerability. Harold had become more than a friend. He was the brother I'd never had. Mrs. Patterson led a support group for elder abuse victims. Carl provided pro bono services for those who couldn't afford legal help. My construction crew from the old days volunteered their skills to repair homes damaged by family exploitation. 3 years into Brad's sentence, I received a letter. His handwriting was different, more careful, as if prison had taught him to consider each word. Dad, he wrote, I follow news about your foundation from here. Every person you help is a small redemption for what I did. I'm getting counseling facing who I became. I don't expect a relationship when I get out, but I want you to know I'm trying to become someone who deserves the father I threw away. I kept the letter but didn't respond. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, but I hoped Brad would emerge from prison a better man, if not for my sake, then for his own. 5 years after that terrible morning in Paris, I stood in my backyard watching Harold teach his grandson to throw a football. Mrs. Patterson's support group met on my deck, monthly sharing stories and strength. The foundation had helped recover over $10 million for elder abuse victims across 3 states. My life was full again, different from what Martha and I had planned, but meaningful in its own way. The empty hours that had plagued me after her death were now filled with purpose. At 72, I'd learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who stand by you when others abandon you, who see your worth, when relatives see only your wallet, who help you rebuild when someone tries to tear you down. Brad had left me at an airport thinking I'd disappear. Instead, I'd found my way home and built something stronger than what he'd tried to destroy. The silent wolf had not just survived, but thrived, protecting others from predators like the son I'd raised. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope, I raised a glass to Martha's memory. We did it, honey, I whispered. We turned our pain into purpose. The foundation's motto, etched on a plaque in my office, captured what I'd learned. Trust is earned, not inherited. Protection is a choice, not an obligation. And sometimes the best revenge is using your survival to ensure others never face the same betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from a new client, an elderly woman whose daughter was pressuring her to sign suspicious documents. Tomorrow I'd help her understand her rights, recognize the danger, protect herself. Tonight, though, I was home safe, surrounded by chosen family who'd never abandoned me at an airport or anywhere else. Brad had stolen money, but I'd gained something priceless, the knowledge that I could survive betrayal and transform it into purpose. The boy who'd once asked me to check for monsters under his bed had become one himself. But I'd learned that monsters could be defeated not with violence or hatred, but with truth, justice, and the determination to prevent others from facing the same darkness. In the end, that was Martha's true legacy and my final victory. Not the recovered money or Brad's imprisonment, but the lives saved because one abandoned father refused to disappear quietly into the night. As my neighbors and friends filled my home with laughter, planning the foundation's next fundraiser, I smiled. The silent wolf had found his pack, and together we would ensure no elder faced the hunt alone. To everyone watching who's faced betrayal by those you trusted most, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by those who try to steal from you, but by what you choose to build from the ruins they leave behind. Stay strong, seek help, and never let anyone make you disappear. What would you do if someone you loved chose money over your life? Have you seen signs of elder abuse in your community? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear that they're not alone. Together we can protect our most vulnerable and turn personal pain into collective power. Thank you for joining me on this journey from abandonment to advocacy. May you always have the strength to roar when others expect you to whimper. And may you find your pack among those who see your value beyond your assets. Until next time, remember, the best inheritance you can leave isn't money, but the knowledge that you stood up for yourself and others when it mattered most. Stay safe, stay aware, and never let anyone convince you that your life is worth less than your bank account.